Today is January 25th, 2018. I'm Blair Williams, and I'm here today with Earl Keller and Sandy Ilgenfritz. Did I get that right?
You got it.
All right. So I'll start off asking, Sandy, how does your family come to settle in Cumberland County?
Well, my father was a third generation Carlisle person. My mother was from Chambersburg. And I know Daddy's family came over from Perry County. That's about all I know. There were 5 children in the family, and they all stayed here in Carlisle, lived here and raised their families here.
How about you, Earl? How did your family come to settle in the county?
Oh my goodness. My mother was born in the county. My dad was born in Harrisburg. They met, my mother was living on West Penn Street, her home, and as was my dad, I guess living close by. His dad had a little grocery store on North College Street. And they met and, of course, married. I can't give you the exact date, but early 1900s.
Okay. Now, Earl, what did your parents do for a living?
Well, my dad was custodian at the YWCA for a long number of years. Left there at the early part of World War II, became a watchman at C.H. Maslin and Son, where he worked until the time he retired. Mother worked in, I'll back up a little bit. My dad worked also in Carlisle Box Factory, and this is interesting. My mother worked next door at the shoe factory. And I have a card at home, and it says, "Dear Alva." Her name was Alva Nickel. He introduced himself, and he says, "You probably, wonder who I am, but I would like, and I can't give it word for word, but to meet you." And I have that card. And that's probably about 1902, 03, in that neighborhood somehow. But my dad worked at the box factory. My mother worked at the shoe factory, which was next door. Incidentally, my home then later was at 600 block of Northwest Street, which was still on the same end of town there. So the northwest section of Carlisle's been my home.
What about you, Sandy? What did your family do for a living?
My father worked at Maslin. Everybody in Carlisle worked at Maslin one time or another. And then he started work for Metropolitan Life Insurance. So he was an insurance salesman. And Mother worked at the Hub store, a ladies' store in Carlisle, that your former interview with Peggy Grove, Peggy was my mother's boss. And so that was in later years. I was probably 15 when she started to work. Women didn't work back then unless they were a nurse or a school teacher. So when the war came, women started to work, and not that that's why Mother went to the dress store, but the women all started to work then. Housewives didn't want to stay home anymore, which was kind of neat. They still don't.
I'm wondering, you said both your fathers ended up working for Maslin. Do you remember what the culture was like at Maslin? Or
No, I don't.
Involved?
Oh, I certainly do, yeah. I go back to the early 40s, I guess, with Maslin's. I think our entire family worked at Maslin one time or another. But I think Maslin was a large part of the Carlisle community. They had things going on for the family at Christmas time. They'd have a Christmas party for kids and so forth, but more especially Hershey Park every year. And we go down by caravan with cars, and Maslin's had a picnic, and they provided everything at that, rides and so forth. And Mr. Prescott, I think, was a personnel manager. He would lead in singing. There would be a ball game and different games and contests and so forth. Truly, that was a town industry that kind of kept our community together.
What were we, about 11 or 12? Because he'd always take me.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we did.
I don't know if that was a date or not, but
No. Yeah, Sandy, we were probably 7th grade, 8th grade, something like that.
I'm wondering, do you remember the Santa at Maslin's?
Well,
The Santa?
Santa, oh
Yeah.
yeah, sure. Had Santa every year, yep. Take the kids and put them on, and he had gifts for them. Like I said, they had a Christmas party for the kids, and they'd give everybody gifts. Maslin was the Carlisle community, a part of it, along with Carlisle Tire and Rubber, Frog and Switch, but they were the mainstays of our community.
Did your family participate in sort of the intramural sports, or?
Somewhat. Maslin's had a softball team. They had a bowling team. My dad was never a ball player, but what Dad did, he had the concession stand at the baseball field, and I'd go over with him as a kid, and he was selling soft drink and, potato chips and one thing or another at the ball game.
So we've talked about it a little bit, but I'm wondering, Sandy, if you could sort of describe your family growing up.
well, I was the only child, so there's not a lot to describe it. And it was great being an only child. I got a lot of attention, and we lived in town on South Pitt Street, so we were city people. And it was fun. It was a quieter, slower time. People weren't rushing around like they do today. And everybody knew everybody. It was wonderful. I loved growing up in Carlisle, especially at Christmas. Maybe you're going to ask about Christmas later, but the downtown was just beautiful.
Right.
Because PennDOT changed the lights around, they have to change the Christmas decorations. So at that time, the whole square was lit up. It was beautiful. And the First Presbyterian Church would have Christmas trees for sale lined up along the street. So when you walked uptown, you walked between all these trees, and it smelled just great.
And with the farmer's market over in the other corner.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was a good place to grow up. People were nice
Yeah,
to each
Christmas
other.
was a special time down there, Sandy, with just the smell from the pine. All the stores were open, the sidewalks
That's
were
right.
full of shoppers. That was Christmas time. Santa had a little, in later years, I know, had a little house on the square for kids to come in, and they give them candy and stuff and then sit on Santa's knee. And the old market house over on the other corner, I hauled market baskets out of there when I was in early teens. Earned enough money to finally buy a bicycle from Louis' Bicycle Shop on down on Hanover Street. But Carlisle was a very vibrant community. It depended on its downtown. That's where the
That's right.
activities were, from the theaters to the bowling alleys to the YWCA hops to the YMCA. It was just a great community to grow up in.
Well, you mentioned the market house. Do you have any other memories of the market house, either going there as a child or?
Oh, I
just
do.
overall?
Yeah, and the vendors in there, nothing, they'd give you samples and so forth of the things they had. But just to be in there and have the feeling, people talking, you didn't need newspapers, you just went in there and listened. But it would be the meat, and be several stands with meats and people with chickens and all kind, just anything, eggs, anything you wanted, vegetable line. When I hauled baskets, I'd go in early in the morning with my wagon, and one of the vendors would bring his produce and stuff into the back door, and they would pay us to load our wagons up with the produce and pull it in and help them set up their stands, and we'd get a nickel or a dime or something for doing that, and that was pretty big money. But that was fun. That was good. But we'd be in there very early on Saturday mornings, and had set up their stands, and then we'd wait, and when the people would come out, we'd say, would you want your groceries hauled home or to the car? And we would take it in a wagon and make another nickel or a dime doing it.
Everyone had their own special boy with his wagon.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a boy, and mother would give him 10 cents, and he'd haul it 2 blocks to the house. And wasn't Pete.
Oh, no.
Can't remember who it was. Yep. It's too bad my husband isn't here. He was a country boy.
Yeah.
And I think all those vendors in there were his aunts and uncles in the market
Oh,
house.
he's got to come in and talk to
Yeah.
him, Sandy.
He used to go in with his parents. In fact, well, they would go in early, or later, I guess. And he would go in with the milkman when he'd come around. Chris would hop on the milk truck. And they would go in, he'd drop him off at the market house, and he'd go in, I guess, and eat, then go to a movie. He needs to come in and talk to you.
Set something up. I believe the connection between the two of you is you met at school, or
We met at Barbara Piper's house.
That was grade school, just over
Yeah.
here in the corner. Yep.
Yeah, he was from the north end, I was from the south end.
Right.
So did you attend different elementary schools then?
Yes, you went to the Stevens
I went to
School,
Stevens. You
and I went to the
Franklin.
Franklin, what is now the YMCA.
Okay. Well, what were your school days like? Early school days.
Oh, they were fun.
Yeah.
We had all women teachers
Right.
because it was during the war, and the men were all in the service. Yeah, that was a good time.
Oh, I lived on Northwest Street and grew up there. Miss McKillop, who was our 4th grade teacher, I'd walk to school with her almost every day, I guess. And we did walk to school.
I never had more than 2 blocks to go to school, no matter where I lived.
I probably had 6 or 8, but to the Stevens building, recess time was special, played different games. But Miss Hoy was my 1st grade teacher. Then I had Miss Varner for 2nd grade, Miss McKillop, Miss Kelly, and Miss Ziegler was 6th grade. She was also the school the school principal. And your principal at Franklin Building also taught.
Yes.
Yep.
Miss Davidson, I couldn't
Yep,
think of her name, yes. Caught me on that one. Yeah, and when I got up to 7th grade, I started to have male teachers. I couldn't get over that. That was, it was kind of,
Yeah, we
they
had
were
all
coming
female.
home from the war then.
And they were single. I don't think any of my elementary teachers were married. They were
At
all
that time,
single.
I don't think the women teachers were allowed to be married. Isn't that awful? What do you think of that? My favorite was Miss Heckman.
Yep.
Louise Heckman. She was our 4th grade teacher. The kids loved her. She was so funny, and she was just, I don't know, just special.
What were some of the things that you did in elementary school, in terms of whether it was just in school or maybe outside of school that you remember?
Oh, we had a Dr. Green in town. This is older Dr. Green. There's a young
Joe
Dr.
Green.
Joe Green.
Old Joe
And
Green, yeah.
every year at the end of the school year, they would have a big party for our class up at their house. And that was up across from where the old hospital was. And I'm trying to think of the street, Wilson Street, I guess. And it was a wooded, the house set up on a hill, and it was a wooded area all around. And we'd go up there and play, and they'd have popsicles hanging on the trees. And Nora Green was in
forgot
my
about
class.
that.
She was the only girl in the family. Yeah, that was fun.
The house is still there, Dr. Green's house. Yep.
He's thinking.
Well, no, I'm wondering, and maybe this makes more sense, to ask about high school, because I believe your high school class is still relatively close. I know you have reunions fairly often, and I could be mistaken, but.
Well, are you asking me?
Yeah, or
What?
anyone.
Okay, well, I didn't get that anyway. Scratch that quick. What was the question again?
So I guess I was going to ask about any people in your class that you remember, but this might make more sense talking about your high school class.
Oh, I can tell you, well, Earl here was county commissioner, that's something. Ballet, what's her name? Help me out here, Marcia
Oh, yeah,
Dale.
Marcia Dale.
Marcia
And
Dale
she's
Weir
still, yeah.
is the founder of Central Ballet, the Carlisle Ballet. She's probably the best known all over the world for her,
That's right.
her ballet school.
And of course, George Hoffer.
George Hoffer was a judge.
Yep.
Barbara Bostock, who is a
She was a
neurosurgeon.
doctor, yeah. Yep.
We had a lot of fellows go in the Army because their dads were stationed out here at the War College, so these fellows got appointments at West Point and have since retired, and some live in the area. Can't think of anybody else famous.
I wasn't necessarily asking about that, but it might be interesting to hear some of the stories of what they were like in high school or maybe even younger. But any other people that you were close with that you remember fondly?
Oh, my goodness. In high school, though, and Sandy can relate to this, the activities I think that we had in high school, like the Saturday evening hops.
Yeah, they were great.
Her dad would pick up her classmates on Saturday night and take us to the hop. It was over here at the YWCA, and then would come and take us home in the evening. But we went to Kruger Milk Bar up here. Go in and have a milkshake or something. And
Well,
then,
at 9:30, the younger kids had to leave the hop, and we were the younger
was it.
kids. So, and by the way, the YWCA was next to where M&T Bank is now, so we were downtown all the time, but we'd go up there, and he got such a kick out of it. I'd call Daddy when we were finished with our sodas, sundaes, whatever we got, and you had to put a nickel in the phone at the time and tell the operator the number you wanted. And I didn't have that much money to spare, so I'd just say, "Come and get me," bang, and put the phone down, and I got away with that without putting my nickel in. So Daddy knew to come, and we'd be ready. And he'd take all the boys that we ran around with lived out in the north end, and all the girls lived in the south end. So Daddy would run all those kids. I don't know how many we got in the car, but probably more than we should have had.
probably 6 or so, yeah. But the hops, that was interesting. Foster Charlton is one name comes to my mind. He had
That's
played
right.
the saxophone. Bob Nickel played the piano. Bob Nickel played the drums.
Yeah, I can't remember who all was there. but-
Yep. Charlie Light, was it Charlie Leitner? No.
No.
It wasn't Charlie Leitner. Played the piano. Anyway.
It cost us a dime to get in.
Yeah.
And our parents would come in and get the money and keep an eye on us. Not that we needed
Yep.
anybody to keep
No,
an eye.
nobody needed
We
to
were
keep an
pretty-
eye on us. We
pretty-
were good.
Boring bunch, I guess. I don't know. We had a good time. I can remember the first time I went, the girls had to dance together because at 12 or 13 years old, the boys didn't dance. And I can remember after so many dances, finally one night I danced with a boy. I was so excited I could hardly stand it. I remember going home and saying, "I danced with a boy tonight." But my best friend was, she and I could really jitterbug. And they'd make a circle around us, and we were the only female dancers that they would do that with. There was, do you remember Bill Myers?
Oh, yes, yeah.
He could really dance. He was a little bit older than the rest of us.
Who's your friends?
My friend was Pat Hunter. Is that what you said? Pat Hunter
Yeah.
Lathede. And she now lives down in Lancaster, she and her husband.
She'd be a good one for you to interview sometime.
Oh, I just talked to her about this last night. I said, "You should come up here." 'Cause she said one day when she was in first grade, she had Miss Eddie. And Miss Eddie's father was a physicist or something up at Dickinson College in a building that's not there anymore, where the Methodist church, former Methodist church was. And one day her dad came and got her out of class in first grade. And she didn't know why she was going, but he took her up to Dickinson and introduced her to Dr. Eddie. And she said, two two motorcycle policemen came riding up the long trail that goes up through the campus. And then behind was a big black convertible, or not convertible, big black car, and then two more police officers on motorcycles. And she said, the man didn't mean a thing to her at the time, but it was J. Edgar Hoover got out to check on something about hair follicles that Dr. Eddy had come up with a way to find out who people were from their hair follicles when someone was murdered or whatever. And Pat said at the time it didn't mean a whole lot to her because she didn't know who J. Edgar Hoover was, but she said, now I can say I met J. Edgar Hoover. And also they had a parade one time with Dwight Eisenhower came through town, and I think it was couldn't have been during the war, it must have been right afterwards. And she and Bobby Hobaugh had sold the most stamps. We had war bonds, and they sold the most stamps, so they got to ride in the car with General Eisenhower. Pat said, I was 6 years old, I didn't know who he was either.
I remember that well. He was in a convertible.
Yep, I remember.
I was standing in front of where the Chamber of Commerce office is there now on Hanover Street, and out along the curb, and Ike came down, waved to everybody in a convertible.
And I met him years later over in Gettysburg. Fritz and I took a drive yet, and we weren't married yet, and went over, and there was a big crowd outside of his office, so we didn't have anything to do. We just stood out there with the crowd, and finally, I guess they got tired waiting and left. But we stayed. And pretty soon he came out, and he walked by us, and I guess he realized how long we had been there. He turned around and came back. He had his Secret Service man with him. And he came back and shook hands, and we talked to him. We had one other couple stayed, and it was a German woman and her son who had come over here after the war. I was so proud of him because he talked to them, and they were so thrilled. And he said, well, I guess I better get going. He said, my wife called and she had supper ready. He was just so down to earth. We just loved him. So that was my thrill.
Yeah.
No camera, no pencil for an autograph, nothing. Any other time we have a camera.
Yeah, you could have had it. Yep.
Especially nowadays.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering, you mentioned George Hoffer and Mrs. Weary. What were they like as high school students?
You better not tell him.
George was a jovial guy.
Better give us another question.
What were you like as high school students?
In high school, I was a tomboy,
Yeah.
but I liked to dance.
Oh my.
Yeah,
Sandy was a dancer.
Yeah, that was my thing.
But she also liked to play softball. And Sandy, I don't know if you remember this, but one of my vivid memories, and you may not, but I was going down South Street, I guess it was. No, it wasn't South Street. Anyway, there by the Franklin School. And Sandy's running along there real slow. And I said, what are you doing, Sandy? She says, I'm doing what that sign says up there. School, run slow.
That
School
wasn't
zone.
me.
That was you. That's a memory I have anyway, Sandy.
Well, I used to play ball, any kind of ball, I didn't care what it was.
Right.
With the Bartoli kids, I think there were 8 of them, so I always had somebody to play with. I lived right near what is now the Y, and I hit many balls through that big window on the Arch Street side.
But that was the days of bicycle. You know, I lived in the northwest section of town, but we rode our bicycle every place we went.
I still have mine.
Do you though? I would be afraid to ride a bicycle today. But that was a mode of transportation. Nobody hauled us. Well, Sandy's dad had picked us up to go to the hop on Saturday night. My dad never drove a car, so my sister did most of the driving. But
Isn't that amazing when you think people really didn't drive in those days?
No.
I know my grandfather never had a car,
Neither did mine. My dad never had a car.
but everything was here in town.
Yeah.
You didn't have to go out like
He
they do
hauled
now.
me, my dad hauled me on the back fender of his bicycle. From the time I can remember anything, one vivid memory was I caught my heel in the spokes of his bicycle
So
one
did
time.
I.
Yeah, it almost cut my heel off. They had to stitch it up, and I was on crutches for a while. But everywhere Dad went, I went with him, but it was on the back. Yeah. Of course, his nickname was Pete also.
They're all
and-
Pete's in his family, that's why.
My brother was also Pete. But I well remember on Northwest Street, right where the railroad crossing was, and I can't think of his name, would sit in the corner, and we'd go past, and he'd say, "Hi, Pete, hi, Pete." I'd be on the back of this bicycle. My dad was pumping away. Went to Little Mission there at the corner of North Street and Northwest, which is now a barber shop, and we lived about 5-6 blocks from there. And he'd go to church on the bike, and I'd ride and come down with him on Saturday nights and other evenings. He was janitor up here at the YWCA, and he'd have to go and stoke the fire at night. So he'd come in and put the coal on it and bank it down for the night, and then come back in the morning. Years of memories.
I can remember when it would snow, we'd go out, of course, out front, and I lived on South Pitt Street then. There weren't that many cars, but a car would go by, the boys would run and do a belly whopper and,
Oh, yeah.
and grab a hold of the bumper. And the cars would go down the street with these kids hanging on the back. And
Didn't you
of
ever
course-
do that, Sandy?
No, that's one thing I didn't do. My parents would have killed me. And the guys in the car would zigzag to try to throw them off. Wonder why I didn't do that. I did everything else.
Yeah. Well, it was nothing, there were cars, but nothing like today. We sledded on the streets.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the streets they closed off, especially Fairground Avenue, over here off of Penn Street that goes down. They would block that off behind Maslin's, and we'd go in there and sled, and cars weren't allowed to come down. But it was a great community to grow up in.
But we didn't have a swimming pool in Carlisle. So we'd have to go to Boiling
Springs.
the creek, and we'd walk. And somebody would always pick us up. I
Did
don't
you
think
ever
I-
hitchhike down there?
Oh, yes. But you knew everybody, so,
Yeah, there was no danger to it.
no, they just know we were going to the pool and pick us up, bring us home.
What was the guy's name that lifted weights?
Jake Hitchens.
He would be down there. Yep.
He was very entertaining. He was a big, nice-looking fella.
Yeah, with
Yeah,
muscular.
he'd have always weights there, and the girls would watch him.
I think you mentioned earlier, Sandy, that your friend was in the car with Dwight Eisenhower when there was a parade after the war. And I'm thinking, I think it was in '51 when Jim Thorpe came and there was a parade for the opening of the movie. I wonder, do you have any memories, either you or Earl?
He came to speak to us at school.
Yeah, he spoke at one of our assembly programs, and I have a picture with him downstairs, down
yeah.
in my basement. Yeah, that was neat. He was here for a couple of days, I think. I didn't go to the premiere.
Well, he spoke over at the theater then, I think. Is that when the picture,
Yeah,
it's
that was the
filmed?
premiere they had. That's why he was here
Premiered?
in
Yeah,
town.
I didn't get to that, although I do remember him speaking outside of the theater. Comerford Theater it was at that time. But he spoke to our assembly at school.
I was kind of hoping for Burt Lancaster, who played Jim Thorpe. He didn't come. But they did have a few people that were in the movie that appeared. And they paraded through town. They had cars, and I don't know what it was, but they were all sitting in convertibles.
Oh, and the convertibles in the back and
Yeah.
waving as they went past.
Because I do
yeah.
have pictures of them.
Do either of you remember what Jim said, or just remember him speaking?
Not a word.
No, I don't have any memory of his speech.
He's just a big fella.
He was,
Yeah, he was.
right?
And that was unusual for the Indians, because they're not big
As
people.
I remember,
He
did
was.
his daughter come back and speak at some point
And,
after
yeah,
that,
his
Sandy?
son was here. I don't
His
know if
son-
it was
okay.
at the same time or not.
Well, I
Yeah.
think one of his sons was here not too long ago for the Jim Thorpe days
Could be.
that they had a little while ago.
Are you sure it was a son or a grandson?
I think it was his son.
Son.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was 2012.
So that was a long time ago.
But you mentioned earlier, Sandy, that your father was, I believe, good friends with Dick Cassetta. I wonder, do you have any memories of Dick, or?
Yeah, I met him. He was a good-looking fellow. Dick Cassetta he's talking about. They had a bicentennial or some kind of a centennial show up at Biddlefield, and he was in it. I think he was. Dick was in it. I'm back to Jim Thorpe again. Dick was in it and played an Indian, which I thought was kind
Thunder Over the Valley,
Yes,
I think was the name of
was
that.
it.
Yep.
And he had a big headdress, and so I got a big headdress too. I don't know what I was supposed to be. But I got my picture in the paper
Yeah.
anyway. That was fun. They had buggies come out and people all dressed in period costumes like you have downstairs.
Yeah.
And I can't really remember too much. I know he was with my dad when Mother met them in Chambersburg. They were at a dance, and I remember Mother saying how good looking they were, both handsome. She said, I really didn't care which one I dated, but she dated Daddy anyway. But Jim married, or not Jim, back to Jim again. Dick married, and a local lady, and they owned Bel Air Park. It's out along the creek. And I don't think they ever had any children, but he was a handsome fellow.
I'm just, I know over the past year and a half, sort of overhearing some of your conversations, I know you've mentioned a few Carlisle characters, and so I know one of them is Tom Flagg.
Oh my goodness, do you
Yeah.
remember
Oh,
Tom
yeah.
Flagg?
Yeah. He used to stand on the corner with his high
Yeah,
hat,
silk hat.
tailcoat, and
Yep. He had an office, I think, right across the street
yeah,
here.
that little
His press shop, yeah.
stone building in the alley.
He printed papers in there.
Yeah,
Have you seen any of the papers?
I have.
Okay, well, you can tell the type, one's big, another one's small, and they were put in there by hand. But Tom
I can
Flagg
remember,
was-
but that's about all. I don't know anything about him. He was just a town character. We used to have a lot of that.
Oh, we had
but
we had a few of those.
Yeah, I don't think we have any anymore. That's
Well,
kind of
there's-
sad too.
Maybe they consider us a town characters
Could
now.
be.
Well, the other one that I remember hearing you mentioned is Bessie, of course.
Bessie's house. Oh my goodness, yes.
Everybody knew about Bessie's.
Yeah.
In fact, my dad was her insurance man. And I used to say, what's that like when you go in there? He says, just like any other house. He said, I sit down in the living room, and he had carried a book that he'd always put all his payments in and everything. And he said, she was very nice. He liked her.
I worked for Kruger Dairy for a number of years, and I'd deliver special deliveries down to Bessie's house, but you never got inside the front door. When the door would open, you'd always look around to see what was going on.
Yeah.
But Bessie, I think, laying everything else aside, she did an awful lot for the community,
Yeah.
for the kids of the community.
She was pretty. She was a heavy-set, fair-skinned black woman, and always wore a big hat, very big hat. And I'd always speak to her. She had no idea who I was, but
Do you
I knew who she was.
Do you remember her sister's name?
B or
I believe it was, yes. He was, her sister lived there with her, and
I spoke about the hub store, the ladies' store where my mother worked, and she said, oh, Bessie's girls would come in and buy mostly underwear, I guess. And I was only, a block away from where their house was, so they'd come in there and shop. And all the girls that worked there knew who they were. And B especially, she was the one I think that did.
one story
kind of
I
the
heard,
running.
and I heard it and took it to be true, that Christmas time, Bessie would call, was a fellow that worked for the borough, lived down the street, and she'd call him up and give him some money, and she said, now, I want the kids of the neighborhood taken care of. So he called the kids together, and he bought gifts and would give to them, and he said, now, this is from Miss Bessie, but you can't go near her house. You've got to stay away from there. Now, as a kid, I imagine you'd get curiosity, but that's one story from down the Bessie era. era.
Sandy, you don't happen to remember what those conversations with Bessie, like what you discussed, do you? Or
What?
you mentioned that you used to talk with Bessie. I'm wondering, do you remember what?
Oh,
those
I didn't talk to her, I just say
just
hi
said
to her
hi.
downtown.
Sure.
Well, she was quite liberal with the churches in town. I know she would make donations to different churches and so forth. I think she was a very liberal type person.
See, I don't know much about her.
I remember seeing her. I can't tell you anything about Bessie's house,
Well, I'm wondering,
other than I did read the book. Did you read the book, Bessie's
Oh, yeah,
House?
everybody read the book.
do you remember what the sort of uproar around, her murder and the trial? Do you remember any of that? Or
I remember of hearing about it, yeah. There was never anything came to a conclusion on it that I remember. The person that was supposed to have murdered her and then set the house on fire. Oh, incidentally, I was in the house. I was on
now it's
town.
coming
I
out.
was on town council, and Bobby Warner was one of the cops. And Bob said, "Earl, I want to take you down." And Bessie's had just burned, and he took me into Bessie's house, and so I was in there, and in the bedroom and so forth. And
I think people felt bad that happened.
yeah.
Really, people liked her.
Well, did you read the book Bessie's House? It had, as our local attorney, Hyman Goldstein said, it's a fine old institution,
She doesn't cater to riffraff.
No,
Like
no,
what
no,
college
no.
boys
Yep,
or
yep.
whatever.
It should be noted as Molly Pitcher. And
He made himself famous.
Yes,
with
he
that
did.
statement.
do you remember any other sort of local characters?
Oh my, probably. And some, we did have some characters in town. I don't think I should mention names at this point.
I know we had one fellow that every winter would go to jail because he wanted to spend the winter.
Yeah.
Cy. And in summer he was fine. He was a painter. He
Right,
painted our
right,
house. I know Mother said, "You're not going to have him." And Daddy said, "He's fine. When he's sober, he's okay."
Well, yes. Cy would break a window or something in early winter and go to jail, and he would be on work release and would walk from the prison. And I think he was washing dishes or something at Dickinson College, and he had got paid, put the money in the bank. But as soon as he got out, his time was up. He had to withdraw his money out of the bank and set his friends up in the bar room and so forth. There were some interesting situations.
Earl, you mentioned a couple times that you worked for Kruger Dairy.
I did.
What was that experience like?
Oh, it was a good experience. I made ice cream. They sent me to Penn State. Incidentally, I'm a graduate of Penn State. I went up there, their dairy husbandry. Made ice cream. And I did that, I guess, about 3 years, and then a milk route came open. And they said, "Earl, would you like to start a milk route for us?" I was never in sales before, but I started a milk route down the West Shore, and I guess about 2 years later, I built it up. We were doing very, very well. And a better route came open in Carlisle, and I took that and did very well in the southwest section of Carlisle. And I did that for several years, and then Prudential Insurance Company, and Sandy's dad was with Metropolitan, and very good friend. He sold me my first life insurance. But then I went with Prudential and put a career with Prudential in. I had in the insurance business close 20 years. And then they asked me to run for office, and that's when the political stand started. But I served 10 years, I guess, on Borough Council, and then 10 years as tax collector, and 12 years as commissioner, and the rest is history.
Well, before we go into that, I'm wondering, Did you, when you were younger, did you ever go to Camp Sells, or were you ever a part of the YMCA?
Never went to camp. I would go to the YMCA, but I never went to summer camps.
Okay.
I went to church summer camp, but never with the YMCA.
And Sandy, you mentioned that you enjoyed playing softball and other sports. And I remember you donated a picture of a softball team, and I think Fritz was the coach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, is that how you met Fritz, or was...
No, he went to Boiling Springs School, and I went
Okay.
to Carlisle, so I
Yeah.
didn't know him until he called one night. When I wanted a date, and I had no idea who he was. I wouldn't go out with him. But I happened to run into him with the date I had, and he was with this tall blonde model. And so then I recognized him. So the next time he called, I went out, and we liked sports, and I liked to dance, so he learned to dance.
Yeah.
And we were pretty good ballroom dancers. So then finally, after we went together for 5 years, we decided to get married, and we have a son that's also a baseball coach and has a boy that's playing ball. So kind of passed that down through the family. My dad wasn't interested in sports at all. I don't know what happened to me. I think I'm a throwback to my one grandfather who was a semi-pro baseball player and a drummer. I played drums in the high school in Carlisle band. I did all the crazy things that this grandfather did. I forget what the question was.
No, it was,
I know. You said about softball.
Yeah.
I only played we just had intramural when I was in school. And I didn't play again until our son was about 4 years old. And I saw girls playing here in town in a league. And I said, what is this? And so they signed me up, and I played for 25 years.
Wow.
Until they did away with the league. That's the only way they could get rid of me.
I remember one time, didn't they have, it was the men of town against the women at one, do you remember that game?
That's the summer fair.
Yeah, the summer, that was it, that was
Yeah.
it. Yeah, we played, you were on the one softball team, I know, I was on the other softball team.
The men against the women.
Men
they
against the
still
men,
do
the
it.
women always beat us.
Yeah, well, I think they still do.
Do they do it?
Well, when you played, they had older guys play. Now they get the younger fellas out
Yeah,
there. It's a little,
yeah.
little too strong for the women, I think.
Yeah. What was the name of that league called?
Just Carlisle Recreation League.
Okay. So it was a borough?
Yeah. Hmm. And it was fun. At one time, we had enough for three groups of teams, A, B, and C groups, depending on your skill.
Yeah.
I was in the A's.
Yeah. But they had a lot of those back, and I know the different industries in town had softball teams, and
Now, I've got a lot of T-shirts at home with all the different teams I played for.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I would still play probably if I had a chance. Now I play tennis instead. I like that too. I like team sports.
But at one point, Fritz was the coach of your team?
Yes, a couple times for 3 or 4 years. And then he said he'd never coach a women's team again.
No.
No, he was a good coach. He cared about the girls, and he really knew baseball, softball, whatever.
And then you also were a part of a choir, right?
Sweet Adelines.
Sweet
Yeah.
Adelines.
We had a chorus here in Carlisle for 8 years, and then we had trouble getting a director. We kept losing our directors for some reason or other. So we all went down to Harrisburg. They had a big course, and I'm still in it, and it's almost 52 years. So, yeah, so gets you a lot of places. I've been places I never would have seen if I hadn't been in that chorus. We go to competitions, and we've been in New Orleans and Hawaii and
You
Las
placed
Vegas.
pretty high too, didn't you, in the competitions?
Yeah, we have a good chorus. Now we meet in Lebanon, which is, I don't like that. We lost a lot of local girls because they didn't want to drive that far. But we even got in the White Hill Reform School, or whatever it is down here, penitentiary, I guess, to sing one night. And I never, better hope I never get in there. But that was really interesting. Going down in the car, I said to the girls, "Are you a little concerned about going in there?" And they said, "Oh no, these are young guys in for forgery and stuff like that." Well, when we went in, this nice looking fellow came over in short pants and looked like a real athletic director, had a whistle around his neck. And I said, "Oh, now, who are we singing for?" He said, "This is the Lifers Club. They're all in for murder." Which I think I shook the girls up a little bit, but we went in and we sang. And the funny thing is, the director was, at that time, stood pretty close, and I was in the front row about 5 feet away from her. And she was so nervous singing in that place that she'd shake her head, and the sweat was flying out and hitting me in the face because we were so close. But we never went back, but it was fun. We didn't have any problems. That's what this director said. He said, you won't have any problems with these fellows because they know they're up for parole in so many years, and if they cause any trouble at all. But the guards didn't have guns or anything, you know. They had big flashlights.
Yeah.
I guess zap them over the head if they had to, but
Oh, when was this?
oh my gosh, probably 35 years ago. I'm not sure. Been too long.
No, I guess, were there any people that stood out in the choir to you that you remember, or?
No, it's just like one big family.
Yeah.
Actually, it still is, with younger girls.
Yeah.
But we took care of each other, and we all liked to sing, so that was something nice. We had the same interest.
And then I believe you were also a member of, was it the Banknotes?
Oh, did I tell you that? Okay. That was a short-lived group we had at the Farmers Trust Company
Yeah.
at that time. And we went out and sang. There were probably 15 of us, maybe. And we sang mostly at churches on Sunday morning. Then it started to get a little expensive because they always took up an offering. They got it from us too.
And they didn't give it to you, Sandy.
We
They-
didn't get paid. No, we didn't get paid for singing. And sometimes we'd hit 2 churches the same day. And I don't know. I guess we just plain lost interest after a
Yeah.
while. But yeah, that was fun too.
Now, how were you involved with Farmers Trust then?
I worked there.
Okay.
We all worked there. We were
Yeah.
called the Banknotes. Did I say that? I thought that was clever.
So how did you become involved with Farmers Trust then?
Just went in and said, "I'd like a job."
Yeah.
Oh, is that what you meant, or what did I?
Yeah.
I was just a teller, which was what I liked. I had the people, waited on the people, and I liked to work with the public and met lots of people while I was there.
How long were you?
15 years,
Okay.
yeah.
And then did you do anything after or before? Or?
Well, I have to tell you this, because this wouldn't happen nowadays.
Yeah.
I worked there 15 years. I was married a couple of years, and we were expecting our first child, our first and only child. And I kept it a secret because in those days, the minute they found out you were pregnant,
Yep.
you were out the door. So I think I was about 7 months pregnant. I wasn't sure I even knew I was at the time, but they didn't know. And the first day I wore a maternity outfit in there, I got 2 of us. The other girl had twins.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, can you imagine them doing that nowadays?
Oh, yeah.
And I looked wonderful. I should have stayed that way.
So you enjoy being an only child so much you only have one yourself then?
Yeah, I did. I had a lot of attention from my mother's side of the family. I was the only one. There were four siblings, and I'm the only one out of that whole 4. So I got a lot of attention, and I enjoy it. I'd still like to get attention.
No, what about you, Earl? Were you involved in any extracurriculars or?
Oh, JC's.
Yeah.
I had a few along the line, but JC's. And then, of course, in the insurance business, we had different associations and so forth. And then other state associations.
He's well-known around Carlisle.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure about that, and I'm not sure if that's good or bad. I've been active, and I've tried to keep active, and I want to continue to do that. We have an excellent community here.
Yeah.
We really, really do. A good place to raise our kids, now grandchildren, great-grandchildren, but been a good community.
I never wanted to live anyplace else.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
We had an opportunity. I was offered, I was with, in management, and the company wanted me to move to Ohio and become life insurance specialist for the state of Ohio. And we looked it over, and I said, you know, I can't. Well, he said, how about, if you don't want to go there, we have Maryland, Delaware available. We like that. I couldn't move out of Carlisle.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm grateful that we didn't, because we've had a
Me
good
too.
life here. It's a good community.
Well, so you mentioned earlier you got onto borough council and sort of worked your way up. What was that experience like in terms of being in municipal government and then county government?
Well, borough council was very good. I think it was gratifying. A lot of meetings, but it was interesting. And then they asked me if I would run for tax collector, and I did. And that was very interesting. I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah.
And then later somebody said, well, you know, it was a period of time they were looking for somebody to run for county commissioner, and I agreed. It was a tough primary race, and I felt good because majority of the votes at that time were coming from the West Shore area. It was really growing, and I felt good that, you know, I could win and won from Carlisle. But had a good 12 years there, worked with a lot of good people from the county government standpoint. But then the different associations with them that you could share what your community had with other communities, and then pick up ideas and bring back that you could put in place in your community. And that was both on the borough level and the county level, with the state associations and national associations. And I'd like to think that, you know, we added something through the years to the growth of our community.
Were there any projects in particular that stand out? Or?
Oh, there were housing projects, especially west of Carlisle. Carlisle annexed a portion of farmland, really, west on the Rittner Highway, where now the warehouses and so forth are. That was growth at that time. That had just been annexed at that time. And yeah, we have seen a lot of growth. Less farms, taking the farmlands, but at one point a person made the statement that Carlisle is a crossroads to everywhere, and if you look, we have the turnpike going east and west, we have 81 going north and south, and all that traffic comes through here. And I think it has helped to generate businesses here. I think it's helped grow Carlisle. Unfortunately, we've lost farmland, but if you look at an unemployment rate right now, I think Cumberland County is pretty good as far as unemployment is concerned. We have pretty much full employment here. And we have an excellent community.
Yeah.
We have an excellent community.
Well, I know you've mentioned sort of those early childhood memories and then sort of school experiences. Is there any other differences that sort of stand out between when you were growing up and now? Changes in Carlisle and the community?
Well, everything's changed, especially the downtown. That used to be a vibrant
Oh, my.
place to be, and now there's not much down there. Dickinson College has certainly grown, and I think that's nice. They've added to the community, and everything they've built up there it's nice. The big football field, big baseball field now. I don't know, I still liked it better growing up. Like I said, it
A
was,
smaller town.
it was a smaller town, and that's pretty much why I stayed here, I guess. I like the small town atmosphere.
But I really think Dickinson College has been a real asset to this community. They've brought a lot here, they've done a lot for the community.
Well, and the War College.
And the War College
Yeah,
has too.
forget about
Yep,
that.
Yep, and continues to. If you look at the Army Heritage Center, we're gonna have our class reunion there,
And what
hopefully
date
if we
is
live
that?
that long.
Well, speaking of your class, you know, you don't want to admit to any hijinks apparently when you were younger, but it seems like your class is still pretty active in terms of getting together and.
We have nice people, close people,
We
they care
do,
about
we
each
do.
other in the class, which I don't know if they still have that now or not. It just, maybe it just happens when you get older, I don't know, but
Well, how big was your high school class?
like 210,
212,
212. All right. Yeah, I mean now.
Which I think we were the biggest class, the largest
At that
class to
time.
that date, yeah.
Yep.
And now I think Carlisle High School, I think the entire student body is like 1,500. So I imagine
Wow.
with the classes being bigger, it's probably harder to know everyone.
Yeah, well, I knew everyone. and
Oh, I
bet you
did too. We had a lot of
Simply
closeness.
because
Yeah.
by the time I got to 7th grade, I was in class, I knew one person in my class, that was Joan Ewing. So I had to learn to know all these new people, which was, at the time, I didn't like it too well, but I thought it worked out okay because every year I'd be in with different kids. And
Well,
so I know them
I
all.
think one new thing to us back in that era, and I'm so glad it changed, but we had our white school, and then you had the black community school down here, the Wilson School. And we didn't go to school together, really. Booter Thompson became one of my best friends in school. And Marjorie, I can't think of, not Thompson, no. But we became real good friends. But that was different, you know, but we never had any problems.
No, we didn't have problems in those days. We all got along.
We did.
Yeah.
There wasn't any difference in the town as far as the north and the south and the east and the west. We were all one combined community. And there was not a lot of trouble. I remember the police telling me one time down the square it was carrying on, and the one guy said, "Earl, behave yourself or I'm gonna tell your dad." And that's all it
That's all
took.
it
you know?
took. So what were you doing carrying on down at the square?
I don't know.
He doesn't want to admit it. Well, that's about all I have. I'm sure I've missed quite a bit, so.
It's good. Well,
Any other memories
you
that?
had a lot. Well, I'll think of them when I leave.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will too. But all in all,
Pat was trying to tell me things last night. She's the one should be here. She remembers better.
yeah,
than I
you should
do.
interview Pat.
I do remember, you know, this was during the war, and I can remember the teacher taking us in the girls' room and saying, now when you wash your hands, you use one sheet of paper because paper's scarce. And you know, to this day, I still do that. And we'd have air raids where we'd have to get down under our desk, and we had, well, you could still see the big windows they have out at the Y there from the top to the bottom, if anything would have come through. And we did have a storm one time, and we all had to get under the desk, and the glass was flying and everything.
Well,
Pat remembered
well, you go
that.
back. Yeah, you go back to World War II. On top of the Molly Pitcher Hotel, they had a surveillance area where there would be teams that would go up there, and the name of the teams failed me at this point, but they would watch for aircraft
Oh, yeah.
from the top of the hotel. My dad was a warden for the neighborhood, air raid warden they called him, I guess. But he had a whistle, but they would have different alerts. Like you had to turn your lights out, and he had to go around the neighborhood and say, "Your light's on, turn your light off," and
We
this sort of
put
thing.
blankets up at the
Air
window.
raid wardens, and that was World War II. And I'll never forget when World War II was over, the parade they had downtown.
I was in Hagerstown, they had a parade too.
Yep,
I was
yep.
on vacation. Yeah, my parents were airplane spotters, and they would take me along, and I think it was out behind the high school, out that
Okay.
stairs gap.
Yep, they had,
I had pictures, a house sitting up on the hill.
Right.
And we'd go out, and to this day, if a plane goes over, in fact, I rear-ended somebody one day, so I was looking up.
but they used binoculars when they got
Oh,
up
yeah.
there, and they'd be continually watching the sky, and,
No, we had to identify every plane, and I was like 4 years old, and I knew the planes. They had pictures the whole way around the building inside that we could see and see
My
what
vivid-
direction they were going in, at what time it was, what kind of a plane.
my vivid memory of World War II, my brother was in Germany, in the Army. 9 o'clock at night, I'd be laying, and Mom and Dad would say, "Now, Gabriel Heater's coming on. We want to find out what's going on in Germany
You know,
tonight."
Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea.
That was it. That was it.
I remember that.
But that was experience. And when World War II was over, I don't know if you remember the celebration downtown.
Well, I remember the one in Hagerstown.
Yep, well, here they had the fire trucks out and the sirens blowing, and that was the end of World War II.
Everybody went downtown. I know
It
we
were.
did the
The
same thing over
downtown
there.
was loaded, and just celebration.
I was at a party at a friend's house, a year or so ago, and he's former Air Force fellow, and he had a model of a plane and said something about it, and I said, yes, a C-119. And everybody in the place looked at me, and I said,
How do you know it?
oh, I know airplanes. And actually, that wasn't old enough, but
Right.
I had a boyfriend that was a pilot of a C-119, so I knew what a C-119 was. I didn't like to say that in front of Fritz, but
No, but he'll watch this, Sandy.
you have to be real careful here.
I also put a tour in National Guards. I had 20 years in the Air Guards. Little active duty with it. But,
You're like Daddy, he was in the National Guard for 3 years out here,
Right,
104, and he said he fought, bled, and died at Mount Gretna. That's where they had their summer camp. He was in when they had horses. And I know that, he and Uncle John Wilson, I know, got in simply because they had horses and they couldn't
do you
afford
remember
one.
the horse brigade? Do you remember the horses?
No, I don't.
I do. I have memory
Just
of that.
Daddy talking about them.
Uh-huh. I remember of them in the parades and so forth.
He's a lot older than I am.
Yes. No, you're a month
Is it-
older than me.
I am. You know, our cutoff date for school was January 31st, and that's my birthday. So I made it by the skin of my teeth. What's your February 1?
9th, yeah, I made it.
The only thing
They
I think of is
squeezed
his
me in.
mother wanted to get rid of him.
My
How she
mom
got
begged
you
them to
in.
take me.
Well, we're boring you.
Yeah,
now.
we
Let's go.
are.
My feet are
And we're
getting cold.
reminiscing, but,
We'll think of a lot more things to say after we leave here.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much for
Well,
coming in
thank
today.
you for doing that. That's
It's a pleasure.